When we enter into the New Testament, we are entering into a Greek, religious, superstitious, pagan landscape. Entering into Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and then onwards, the cause is no longer Hebrew. The cause is a new Jewish religious movement. And it sounds a little weird, as I've been saying, that the term Christ wasn't applied to literally a man. Christ wasn't an application to apply to a man. Christ was a philosophy. And as I've been showing, may be weird to hear. Because that may take away the fact that this term Christ in the Greek Messiah, I'm going to keep it there because that's what it needs to be acknowledged as. That there was no actual application for this term at all. And that's not what I'm saying. In the context of justification, in the context of Emmanuel, in the context of Christ, because, and if we're going to take this true, John 4, verse 24, that God is a spirit, it is illogical to look for a physical manifestation of the type of character associated or impressed upon the term Christ or Messiah. We have to look at this term according to the substance of the thing that's giving it. So that's what I've been doing according to the Bible as I've been led to understand it, according to how, quote unquote, God is supposed to be viewed. And from Genesis to Malachi, Malachi to Revelation, reading carefully according to how the Bible would associate its definitions and its context, this is the only fitting application if we're going to again believe that only in spirit and in truth the true worshipers shall worship the Father. That being said, hearing that can make it sound like the idea of a Messiah or of a Christ doesn't apply, as if it's not a real thing. So let's look at this. Let's look at this. And what we're going to do right now is we are going to look at the application of this term to the anticipated or to the expected individual that the Jew wanted to appear, and at that point in time in their history. 3 applications. 1 is prophet. They looked for a prophet. 2, they looked for a king priest. And 3, they looked for a virtuous sufferer. They looked for a prophet, a king priest, and a virtuous sufferer in their scriptures. Now, one individual that did these things was Messiah, or the embodiment of all 3 of these things within one individual was Messiah. So this term that we're going to get into, Messiah, we've seen the Hebrew, we've seen the Greek, we've seen the associations. But now I want to look at how the Bible expresses what its folks were looking for, what they should have been looking for, what they expected. Because they expected something. They physically expected something. And we're going to look at these 3 categories of what they expected to get a better understanding of where we are supposed to stand today. The message that we are receiving and having a dialogue over this morning, this faithful Wednesday morning, it is beyond crucial, it's beyond necessary, it is beyond important to our growth and development as human beings and also as devotional creatures. But I also have a message for pastors, for ministers, and for leaders, and for you too, who are the pastor, the minister, and the leader of what is within you, your soul temple. Head on over to my website, linwoodjacksonjr.com, click the affiliate link, leading you to Church Source, and browse through their catalog. They have beautiful Bibles there. They have beautiful Bibles. They have beautiful resources for you to tune in to your personal devotional conversations, daily habit. This website, you can browse through it and observe what they're doing for you, for us, to make understanding our need to know the scriptures that much more important. So browse through their catalog, observe their resources, and whatever you do, do for the sake of growing your personal devotional conversation. Number 1 on that list is prophet. Number 1 on that list is prophet. They looked for a peculiar prophet. And the beginning of this peculiarity is in Deuteronomy 18:18. Deuteronomy 18:18. Deuteronomy 18:18 reads, I will raise them up a prophet from among their brethren like unto thee, and will put my words in his mouth, and he shall speak unto them all that I shall command him. So Moses, forget Moses, right? Because if this was supposed to be what Moses taught, it would have said that. I will put in his mouth my words. This means that there is going to be a specific philosophy that needs to be heard, that is not then being given, and that Moses did not give. Now we know from our studies that what this individual articulated was Emmanuel. Emmanuel is what came out of this individual's mouth. Emmanuel is the philosophy of the Creator, and he gave it. They looked for a prophet. Isaiah 11:1 and 2. The book of Isaiah 11 verses 1 and 2. Isaiah 11 verses 1 and 2 reads, And there shall come forth a rod out of the stem of Jesse, and a branch shall grow out of his roots. And the Spirit of the Lord shall rest upon him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, the Spirit of knowledge and of the fear of the Lord. And so here we have a better explanation of what those words are that this prophet is supposed to be saying or teaching or giving or articulating or presenting or demonstrating. A wisdom. A wisdom. A specific wisdom, a specific understanding, a specific knowledge, leading to and emphasizing the fear of the living God. Not fear as in what takes place within the body under duress, under strange duress. Fear as in regard, respect, or revere. They looked for a prophet to articulate the wisdom of the living God, to speak the philosophy of the living God, and not in reference to Greek philosophical, religious, superstitious, pagan context, but according to what was already existing within their stream of thought. This is what they looked for. Next on the list, king priest. Next on the list, king priest. Isaiah 59:16 and 17. Isaiah 59:16 and 17. And he saw that there was no man, and wondered that there was no intercessor. Therefore his arm brought salvation unto him, and his righteousness sustained him. For he put on righteousness as a breastplate, and an helmet of salvation upon his head. And he put on the garments of vengeance for clothing, and was clad with zeal as a cloak. Now, if we're listening to this correctly, this sounds like a high priest going into war. All of the terms here are used in the service of the priesthood, of that former priesthood. The breastplate is a key point or figure for this, to let us know that this is referencing an active priest, a warrior priest, a revenging priest. A revenging priest. They looked for a priest to war on behalf of the things of their God and to set up a government. They looked for a king priest, someone that would relieve them or alleviate them from being subject to the throne of kingdoms to becoming the absolute throne of kingdoms for all to regard. This was their king priest, warrior, that they expected. This is your host, Linwood Jackson Jr., checking in with you. How are you? Thank you. Thank you, family, for checking into this program. Thank you for staying tuned continually to Justification. This is a much needed topic, and based on the conversations I've had with different people, whether they be pastor or lay, it is at this time that there is a need to understand more of what the Bible is saying. And so I want to invite you to check out the book, Justification, of which this show is based off of. Check out this book. It is an in-depth research book based on this term, justification, and it allows you, the reader, to know what you can do, what I can do, what we can do collectively to make our lifestyle, devotional lifestyle, to make our devotional lifestyle that much more better, so that our human lifestyle can understand the correction it needs to make in order for the two to marry. So check out this book and please continue to enjoy this program. And so you say king priest, and then you hear this verse from Isaiah, and you can't ignore going back many more chapters in Isaiah to 9 verse 7. Isaiah 9 and verse 7, reading, of the increase of his government and peace there shall be no end upon the throne of David and upon his kingdom, to order it and to establish it with judgment and with justice from henceforth even forever. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will perform this. So when we're reading this, we're getting the feel of a new kingdom of David. We're getting the feeling added on to Isaiah 59, the warrior priest. Well, this warrior priest is supposed to establish a government in the name of their God. And it is supposed to look like David's, but not necessarily just of David's, because David wasn't really a king priest. David was just a king. He had his own priest. So David wasn't a king priest, but they expected the avenging priest, the revenging priest, the annihilating priest, the warrior priest, the defending priest of the laws of Moses and of God, to also sit on a throne like David. How can we further say this? Zechariah. The book of Zechariah 6 and verse 13. Zechariah chapter 6 and verse 13. Zechariah chapter 6 and verse 13. Even he shall build the temple of the Lord, and he shall bear the glory, and shall sit and rule upon his throne, and he shall be a priest upon his throne, and the counsel of peace shall be between them both. So when we're reading in the book of Isaiah about a government of peace, right? Now we're thinking stately, we're thinking strictly government. But we're not really realizing that the Bible is not a strictly government book. This is not a municipal book. This is not a secular book. Everything in the Bible is related to philosophy or religion. Everything primarily or firstly is religion or philosophy. The kingdom or the government to be established that they looked for, although stately, was primarily priestly. They looked for a king priest to defend and to uphold the name and the laws of Moses, and also their revere for the God of Moses at the same time. In the plainest text, Psalm 110, verses 1 and 4. Psalm 110, verses 1 and 4. Psalm 110, verses 1 and 4. The Lord said unto my Lord, sit thou at my right hand until I make thine enemies thy footstool. The Lord hath sworn and will not repent. Thou art a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. This is plain, right? We don't have to guess at this. They looked for a king priest to manifest, and they temporarily got it in the Hasmonean dynasty. That section between Malachi and Matthew that's not there, the history of the Maccabees, the Hasmonean dynasty. This is what they looked for. This was a family of priests that claimed the land, and in doing so, did it just as violently as the judges did from the book of Judges. And in the name of their God and of his laws and statutes and such as given to Moses, and established their own king-priest dynasty. Now, that was, of course, overthrown by Herod, who became the new king of the Jews. And this actually ties into the literature within the Gospels, where it says, how say they that the Christ is the son of David? Well, it's alluding to the fact that there was a previous priesthood dynasty. You can also see that in there, that it's alluding to the previous priesthood and dynasty. He is not that son of David, but he is of that dynasty of king priests. Third on this list of expected or anticipated messiahs is the virtuous sufferer. The virtuous sufferer. The individual suffering for the cause of their doctrine or philosophy. Isaiah 53, 3 and 4. Isaiah 53, 3 and 4. Isaiah 53, 3 and 4. He is despised and rejected of men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. And we hid, as it were, our faces from him. He was despised, and we esteemed him not. Surely he hath borne our griefs and carried our sorrows. We did esteem him stricken, smitten of God, afflicted. Now, we're going to have to abandon the inherited Christian scope for this one, and also for the previous ones. But for this one, because the authors have wound all of these narratives of what was expected into one figure. And there is a play on this character trait. Now, this character trait we saw before. It is in the Greek Christos. This is the character trait of what was called the Christos, the prophet virtuously suffering for their cause, even to death. The prophet doing well, either alive or to death, for the cause of their doctrine or philosophy. This is what they looked for, also in addition to the king priest and to the prophet. Psalm 69, 18 through 20. Psalm 69, 18 through 20. Psalm 69, 18 through 20. Draw nigh unto my soul and redeem it. Deliver me because of mine enemies. Thou hast known my reproach and my shame, and my dishonor. Mine adversaries are all before thee. Reproach had broken my heart, and I am full of heaviness. And I looked for some to take pity, but there was none, and for comforters, but I found none. This is the virtuous sufferer. The individual whose cause is more important to them than even life itself. Now let's strip that Christian narrative away of what is attached to that virtuous suffering. And let's keep it Hebrew. Let's keep it Bible. The leader of that first movement, the living God's chief apostle, was a prophet of the living God and fulfilled that prophecy, articulating the wisdom within the scriptures. This individual did suffer for that philosophy and was killed for what he taught. There is nothing that first initial movement attributed to that man's dying other than dying for the sake of that wisdom. And the dying the dying for the sake of that wisdom, doing for that individual what it did for Abel. What it did for Abel. Abel's death spoke through the earth. His blood spoke through the earth after he died. Now, this isn't literal. This is figurative. This is philosophical. The man's death, Abel's death, forwarded his philosophy of what it meant to be a concrete observer of the living God at that point in time. Same thing. When this individual was crucified, his wisdom became more powerful and spoke to the justice of his cause and act. Have a desire to take your conversation to its highest potential? If you do, hop on over to my website and check out the School of Reform. Yes, school is most definitely in. Knowing Bible is the course that I am now offering to take your conversation to its next level. Grow closer not simply with the philosophy that is within the Bible, grow closer not simply with the devotional character of the living God, but grow closer with yourself also. So head on over to my website, check out the School of Reform, and check out Knowing Bible. This is a course for the learner that wants to make their life, both personal and devotional, more full. Now, it was Paul that, hearing of the virtuous sufferer, what the virtuous sufferer died for, placed upon that individual the Greek context for what is worthy of that sort of sufferer. The narrative of suffering virtuously is a Greek narrative. The stories and the fables of the righteous sufferer, of the virtuous sufferer, are what allow that individual to be seen as godlike, godly, or as a god among men. This is a Greek narrative. In their literature, in their mythologies and such, this is their narrative. Paul's epiphany was not accidental. Paul's epiphany was that he associated the righteous sufferer in the Greek context to what was in the scriptures. That first initial movement did not see what Paul saw. They did not see the man's blood as being wholly divine for some specific reason, and his resurrection being the cause of him ascending upwards to God with his blood for the purpose of being a faithful high priest for the sins of the people. This is all of Paul articulating what that initial doctrine was in a Greek context. Initially, that resurrection simply was acknowledging the fact of what that lifestyle meant and what that lifestyle, that devotional lifestyle, should be attributed for, and what that cause is. The initial movement was about lifestyle. The initial movement was about the present, the here and the now, and the resurrection to take place within. That resurrection initially was not observed the way that Paul later in a Greek context articulated it. That first movement, seeing, they only saw that man, their leader, as a prophet and as a sufferer, fulfilling those prophecies. They didn't see the individual going beyond that, the same way they didn't see anything phenomenal within Moses, Elijah, Elisha, or Enoch. These individuals were special, not because they were divine or God-men, but because they were intimately so connected to their God that he had to have them back to him, or that their bones, after they had died, continued to have to give out the essence that their connection to God had when living. So the entire scope of what we now are seeing and are honoring when it comes to this term Christ, it is completely different from the initial movement. And it is completely different from what the living God's chief apostle taught. Because the individual did fulfill each of these three things. He was that prophet that spoke the living God's wisdom. He did virtuously suffer for that philosophy. And he also was the chief priest of Emmanuel. Now, this is all figurative language, but it is all pointing to a very concrete reality of an individual preaching and speaking the living God's words and dying for that to show that this is it. This is that wisdom. So much so that I am willing to die for it. And the same connotation of that act is the same connotation that was put on Abel. Abel also being a Messiah figure, because he fulfilled certain criteria of what was looked for. And so when we're hearing these terms and going through all of these things, we have to keep them in the perspective of the Bible, because at the end of the day, our conversation's health is what matters.